Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Market Current, the weekly seafood pricing focused video series from Undercurrent News. This week, Lorin, Castiglione and I will go into a subject we're both very geeky about, which is cod and haddock pricing. Lorin, who's head of price reporting for UCN in North America, delivers a weekly price assessment on cod, haddock, pollock, sole, and other ground fish. She's going to kick things off by running through this. I'll then take over to cover the latest prices for H&G cod and haddock, which is sent to China and other countries in Asia for processing, then to the US. I'll also look at some of the auction prices we have available on the site for cod and haddock. So first of all, Lorin, kick us off and take us through what's happening with the latest developments in the US wholesale market for cod and haddock.
All right, thanks, Tom. So we went into this year expecting high prices, and we surely got high prices. So let's dive in to access US wholesale prices. You'll hover over on prices up at the top navigation bar and click into US wholesale. And then you'll navigate to the ground fish tab. And there we go. I'll first start off with single frozen, and then I'll get into twice frozen product forms. So let's start with Icelandic cod. And when you take a look at the history here, you can see that upwards trajectory beginning at the end of 2024. We can look at year-on-year view, and we are over $3 a pound above where we were a year ago. And a severe supply squeeze is largely to blame here. So Iceland plays a strategic role. It's one of the primary single frozen Atlantic cod suppliers for the US, as well as for the UK and the EU, where demand is very active, and that tightens the availability coming into the US. When we look at a wider supply view, Barents Sea saw a 25% TAC reduction this year, potentially looking at another 21% dip next year. We've got a ban on Russian seafood, and we have high tariff risks on Chinese processed product, which all limit the available supply coming into the US. I want to jump over to Alaskan cod. There we go. And we see a similar story. It's not as dramatic as the Atlantic side, but it follows the similar patterns. We don't have tariff risks here, but we have seen Barents Sea reductions of about 9% this year, with reports that biomass has shifted north, which complicates catch and supply timing. Additionally, as the Atlantic cod posted premiums, there were some instances of substitution that also put added pressure on the market here. And of course, the domestic cost stack of we've got fuel, cold storage, labor costs that keep the floor firm.
Why is it, Lorin, that the Pacific cod pricing has kind of lagged behind the Atlantic? Do you hear from your contacts in the market?
So Atlantic cod is, it holds a premium over Pacific, kind of always has. There's more of, excuse me, there's more of a preference for the Atlantic cod. My contacts have told me the ones that where, the substitutions were being placed on the Atlantic or from the Atlantic side to the Pacific side, they kind of saw a reversal of that. So there's definitely the preference for Atlantic cod over Pacific.
Right.
And then
other than maybe in the Pacific Northwest, it's more Pacific, but East Coast
right,
definitely against Atlantic. Yeah.
Yeah, general trends. So now jumping to Icelandic haddock. Let me pull up some pricing here. And while quota reductions aren't an issue here, we actually saw a bit of an increase for the 2025-2026 fishing year. Prices still climbed, as you can see. We've got a lot of auction volatility coming out of Iceland, rising fuel, labor costs, sustained European interest here, as well as demand from those summing out from those premiums on cod for haddock. And historically, haddock rides on the coattails of cod, and this is just another example of that. So jumping to twice frozen product from China. Some of those same pressures exist in this sector, but new pressures come into play as well. So let's get both Atlantic cod and Pacific cod loins on the same chart. There we go. And you can see there's definitely relations here. Tariffs surely played a role here, causing a lot of uncertainties. There were a lot of shifts in tariff rates this year, gray areas on when they were being implemented. So importers pulled back on orders, waiting on clarity, and that reduced and delayed some volumes coming into the US. There have been shifts away from China for processing, which has created some bottlenecks in the supply chain, as well as higher freight, longer lead times, all of which factored into prices climbing on twice frozen cod. And throughout this rise, we really haven't seen a lot of demand destruction just yet. So product continues to move at these premiums.
Why is it you hear from your contacts that demand has not been impacted, and are you surprised by the extent to which the market has held at the price levels as they've been?
Yes, every week I'm asking contacts, have we hit the ceiling yet? And there were some inclinations of that earlier in the year, but we blew past those. And now the sentiments are, at the end of the year when there's more demand from the holiday season and prices continue to rise, there might be some pushback then. But it's been a surprise for everybody that demand is still holding.
And also presumably partly driven by the pricing for products in the market going so high during COVID, staying that high, and there being like a large margin to play with, which is probably being eroded, but still enough there for profitability.
Right, and it's not an isolated incident where we're just looking at one species that's seeing rising prices. It's pretty much across the board. So there really isn't too much of an outlet. So that if you're looking for whitefish, you're going to have to be paying the premiums.
Yeah, very true.
And now twice frozen haddock. So there we go. There are some interesting dynamics at play here that we haven't talked about yet. The first being Section 301 tariff exemption extension, and that was supposed to expire at the end of August. And that's now being pushed until the end of November. If the exemption expires, then haddock will see an additional 25% on top of the existing tariff, which currently sits at 30% out of China. Another big overhang is the MMPA rule that's looming on January 1st, 2026, when NOAA's Marine Mammal Protection Act restrictions are expected to ban finished haddock products, which are made from Russian raw materials, from entering the US. And this will close a critical loophole and supply channel for the US. And no, this did not already happen back in March of 2022 like it did for other species. Russian haddock has still been entering the US this whole time by means of China. So those are just some of the major factors impacting things in the US wholesale markets. Tom was going to bring you a little bit more upstream and review what's happening closer to the source with raw materials.
Yeah, let me just share my screen and take over with some H&G pricing. So we're starting here with a data set I created earlier, which you can create yourself using the bar here to search for the data sets, but I thought it would be faster to have it ready. This is 4 price assessments, which I do every week, which is headed and gutted cod and haddock from Russia and from Norway, CIF China, so it's cost, insurance, and freight China. So this price reflects the price which deals are agreed at, and then it can potentially take 3 months for that product to arrive in China. And you can see here the considerable increase in raw material pricing across the board. You've got the blue here is the Norwegian cod, the green is the Russian cod, the red is Norwegian haddock, and the orange at the bottom there is Russian haddock. And I'll just talk you through some of the price movements we've seen over the past year. And you can see here at the end of 23, that's when prices hit the bottom for H&G. That was the point then when former President Biden announced the executive order banning Russian seafood processed in China and then sent to the US. That actually came into play, I think, in June of 24, but I think they were given, maybe, was it 30 days, Lorin? Do you remember how long there was but it was basically
a brief time period.
But I think it was for orders. It was only given, they were given a period for orders, to ship orders that had already been made, I think, wasn't it? But that you couldn't place new orders after that. And then June the 1st was the cutoff. I think it was June the 1st. Yeah, so then that caused, as you can see here, the Norwegian pricing for cod H&G to rise, and the Russian pricing in green here to drop, but then also rise, because essentially you've got this shortage in the cod market due to the reduced quotas, which Lorin mentioned earlier, which effectively saw the Russian price increase as well for the H&G. And then on the haddock, you see like a much more of a tighter correlation between the two pricing until we get to here, which is when the Marine Mammal Protected Act news came out, and it was clear that the Russian from January the 1st, Russian haddock can no longer go to China or Vietnam or other Asian processing hubs and then be sent to the US market. So that's why you see this red, this spike here for Norwegian haddock, because all of the US buyers now can only work with the Norwegian raw material. And then you see another spike here around May, I think it was, where Naribo and Merman, two of the big Russian fishing companies, were effectively banned from the EU market. The EU issued, actually, no, maybe that was back in May, I think that happened. The EU issued an overnight ban towards the end of May. Saw the two companies, EU buyers, unable to pay the two companies, which in effect is a ban, because that product can't flow into the market anymore. So yeah, this is a data set you can create for yourselves. Weekly assessment we do. There's a story written about it every week, covering these H&G pricing. Then I will move on to another set here.
You had said that these raw materials, it takes about 3 months to get to China. Yeah.
So let me just share another screen, and we can talk to that. So in terms of the shipping times, you're looking at roughly, I think, even with Atlantic, from what I'm hearing from sources, it's really kind of 6 months, even with Pacific cod, Pacific or Atlantic. Either way, you're kind of looking at, roughly speaking, 6 months from the H&G purchase to then that product, sort of got to go to China or Vietnam or Indonesia in lower volumes, be processed, and then sent to the US. Obviously, the West Coast is slightly quicker, but yeah, for East Coast, it could be 6 months from the time that the H&G order is placed to that finished product arriving in the US market, which is something we can look at here. I mean, Lorin showed how you can overlay US wholesale pricing on top of each other, but here I've got our weekly assessment for Norwegian cod H&G, CIF China. So I'll add onto this the assessment that Lorin does for double frozen cod from China. Which size should I pick, Lorin? What would you say would be the benchmark?
You're going to do fillets. Let's do the 10 to 12.
Good, 10 to 12. Okay. There we go. Because we've got more data for this, I'll then turn this into pounds. So it's relatable for the US market. I'll change it into monthly, because that kind of makes the data easier to digest. I'll move this period up, and then we can see here in the green at the top, we've got the Lorin's price assessments. This is now turned to a monthly price, a monthly average. Obviously not only a short period of October, but you can see the pricing for the raw material in blue at the bottom, increasing very much in sync with the finished product in the US market. But obviously we need to kind of go back here to April to look at the price in blue here in April, correlates really to the price now in the US market, because of the time we mentioned there for the product to be purchased, transported from Norway to China, processed, and then sent to the East Coast or West Coast. So yeah, and if you look at this, it's really there's been a 30% increase in the raw material price from this point until now. So I mean, it's really the question of like what the market is going to do with this, because so look here in October, this price in blue here, which is 30% higher than it was back in April, that product is going to be hitting the US market, or products rather produced from that H&G will be hitting the US market next February, March. And I mean, I know obviously we can't get into forecasting too much, Lauren, but what's any impressions on what you're hearing from your sources in terms of what's going to happen there? Is there potential for that to be absorbed in the margin, or price is going to have to continue to go up?
I mean, there's got to come a point where something's got to give, right? Because we're already at such extreme highs, and there's only so much that consumers will pay. So there's got to be some give, and that's why I wanted to call out the lasting effects of these rising raw material prices. That it's not just impacting things today; it's 6 months down the line. So the U.S. wholesale prices and the raw materials, there are correlations. There are strong correlations, but it's not always the case. So only time will tell. But there's a lot of upwards pressures on the markets right now that point to prices continuing to firm.
Yeah, and from what I understand, people are really kind of obviously very nervous about the price level and buying hand to mouth, but buying as little as they can, because no one wants to be caught. No one wants to be caught with high priced inventory, when things potentially move the other way. However, we've obviously got this potential for the Barent's cod quota to be cut by 21% again next year. So you've really got the situation where demand is going to drop, no doubt, at the pricing, but it could be that supply continues to drop more than demand. So
right. So these pressures are just canceling each other out, and where does it leave us?
Yeah, obviously the $1 million question here is what Russia does, because Russia has basically gave Norway until the end of September to lift the sanctions on Maribo and Murman, and Norway didn't do that and has not responded on it. No, neither side has kind of issued a public statement on it. We've been trying to get intel on this, and Russia basically said, if you don't lift these sanctions, we'll ban your vessels' access to our waters, which from my understanding is not a huge issue, because it's not like the Norwegians do loads of fishing in Russian waters. But then Russia also said, we'll basically set our own quota. So we will then, instead of cooperating with you, Norway, on setting the Barents Sea cod quota, we'll set our own one unilaterally. And the government came out and said, the Russian government came out and said, we actually think the cod quota could be increased next year. So this is all. It's usually in the next couple of weeks. The joint Norwegian and Russian Fishery Commission meet to actually set the quota based on the scientific advice. So yeah, we're trying to kind of pin down what's happening with that, but it's all very, very uncertain as to how things are going to move.
I'll just do the Groundfish Forum soon, which this will all be talked about, and we'll be reporting live from. So
yeah, for sure, it's going to be Groundfish Forum in Tokyo in a week or so, and this will all be. Often they have the meeting the same week as the Groundfish Forum. Not sure if that's happening this year, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting to meet with a bunch of the Russian industry players to speak to them about it, and the Norwegians, and we'll try and work out what's going on. I've just skipped here to now sharing another data set which I made earlier, which is the Pacific cod assessment we do. This is a monthly assessment taken in the middle of the month, and this is for longline caught US Pacific cod H&G, J-cut, FOB, Dutch Harbour, in various sizes. And again, I've preemptively here added on a couple of Lorin's assessments too, for Pacific cod in the US market for loins and fillets. And you can see a similar dynamic between that we saw with Atlantic. And again, you're going back 6 months here to see, to kind of look at these raw material prices we're seeing now, which are considerably higher than they were 6 months, which has caused this current finished product price. So it's a similar dynamic with Pacific cod, although it's not as extreme as Atlantic cod. And the the quota on Pacific cod will be announced in December, when the management council meet, usually the first week of December. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see what happens with that, because it's much smaller than well, I say it's much smaller. The way that Atlantic cod has been reduced, it's not so much of a difference
that gap
now,
has narrowed for sure.
Yeah. So there's that data set. I'll move on to haddock now. I'll change to share this tab. This is again the green data here is the raw material pricing. Oh,
the green's the wholesale.
Yeah, the green's the wholesale pricing. Yeah, sorry, yeah, my bad. Green's the wholesale pricing, and below we've actually got here the two raw material pricing. We've got the Russian haddock assessment we do for H&G, and the Norwegian assessment. I didn't include the Russian assessment on the cod chart because the Russian cod could no longer come to the US, having been processed in China. But for whatever reason, a lot of people say it's the sort of strong Alaska lobby that was behind the Biden executive order. The haddock was not included. So Russian haddock H&G continued to go to China, continued to be processed into finished products and come to the US market. However, that is all going to change, as Lorin mentioned, from January the 1st because of the Marine Mammal Protected Act, which I think Russia just didn't respond to the US on. So that product has been blocked. So that's why here you've seen that spike from September to October. These are weekly assessments, but I've changed them to monthly to make the data more digestible. You can see that spike in the blue price there, which is the Norwegian. And again, going back 6 months, there's a considerable increase there in raw material pricing, which is going to ultimately filter through to the US market. And the increase here could be steeper because obviously, there's only, I think, an 18% increase looking from the April level to now on the Norwegian H&G side. But the reason that increase has not been as steep as the cod, where you've seen a 30% increase, is because the fact that the Russian and the Norwegian haddock H&G has stayed much closer because the US market has been open to both. Now, obviously, the Russian haddock is not available to US buyers, via China. So you'd anticipate maybe a wider spread developing on the Norwegian haddock continuing to increase, and the Russian haddock stabilizing, continuing to maybe dropping on the H&G side. The outlook is also for an increase in the Barents Sea haddock quota. So yeah, that's something where some sources were talking about the potential for even a softening in the haddock market generally because of this potential scientific recommendation for an increase. I'm not sure that that's going to happen really on the Norwegian side, particularly because of the fact that they're the only game in town into the US market. And then just to finish things off, I thought I'd quickly just show some of the more upstream pricing we've got, which is we've got cod and haddock auction pricing out of Norway and also Iceland. So here, this is turn it back to NOK. So this is the pricing from Norges Raffleslag, which is one of the two major auctions in Norway. The other's called Serofi. So yeah, you can see here, this is the weekly pricing. I can change that to monthly here, so you can get more of a sense of like how the volume has declined dramatically because of the reduced quotas, and the pricing is really spiking to record levels. Move that forward here.
That is a dramatic fall in volume.
Yeah, it's a really interesting chart to visualize it with the volume, because obviously we don't have that with the H&G. And then you can also just to quickly show you some of the other capabilities of the platform, you can go here, show variations, and I can look at the in addition to the charting, you can look at the pricing in table format. You can look at that with a week-on-week comparison. You've got the changes in NOK. You've got the changes in percentage there. You've got the changes in volume, the changes in percentage there. And you can also look at year-on-year. And then when you look at year on year, you can really see, these, you're talking, 30% plus increases for the main sizes, and there's much lower volumes of 4 to 6 available. But the main sizes are the 1 to 2.5, 2.5 to 4. These are 97% big decreases in volume and big increases in value. And then to switch to the Icelandic data we've got. This is a Icelandic haddock set. We've also got Icelandic cod. We've got gutted and ungutted cod and haddock from Iceland. This is again from auction networks in Iceland. So we're getting volume data as well as value. And again, you can see, prices much more volatile in the auctions, but you can see firm pricing really, which we're just seeing that really across the board in the whitefish complex due to all of these crazy dynamics which we've covered today. So yeah, hope that was useful to everyone. I think that's enough cod and haddock talk for one day.
Yeah.
Never have too much for us, but yeah, maybe for the general public. But for anyone who doesn't have access to this data and found it interesting, you can sign up for a free trial with a link, which is in this post, whether it's on LinkedIn or in the post on YouTube or in the story. And if you have any feedback or comments, great to hear those from you. And if you have any feedback for us on other pricing data you'd like us to cover with these videos, please get in touch. Thanks for watching and take care.